which is where we're at on here. So homework 16 wants you to find the slope of the line. When I think of slope, I kind of think about having a hill. If I have my hill, if I'm going uphill as I go from left to right, my slope is positive. If I'm going downhill as I go from left to right, my slope is negative. We have two other kind of weird slopes. One of them is when we have our horizontal line. The horizontal line should be like the ground. It should be flat. And so the slope of that is going to be 0. You also have a line that's vertical, straight up and down. If your line is vertical, the slope is going to be undefined. And we'll talk about why in a minute. But just kind of make that note that you've got those special cases or whatever where you either have a horizontal line. If it's horizontal, the slope is always 0. Or if you have a vertical line, your slope is going to be undefined. I'm going to move this up here. So what slope is it's the change in the y value over the change in the x value. Well, your y-axis goes up and down, and your x-axis goes, I'm going to write that x, right or left. So they're going to give you a formula to find slope. The formula to find slope looks like this. M is the symbol for slope. I don't know who made that up, and it doesn't make any sense why it's an M. But M is the symbol for slope, just like we had y equals mx plus b. And then they're going to say that you take the y value from point 2 minus the y value from point 1 to find the change in the y direction, over the x value from point 2 minus the x value from point 1. So if I'm going to use the formula to find my slope, I would need to know where these 2 points are. Usually you read from left to right. I'm going to call the point on the left my first point. So my first point's ordered pair would be -2, +2. My second point is at 4, -1. So this would be my x value from point 1, my y value from point 1, my x value from point 2, my y value from point 2. If I plug them into my formula, the y value from point 2 is -1. I'm going to subtract the y value from point 1, which is +2. On the bottom, I'm going to take the x value from point 2, which is 4. I'm going to subtract the x value from point 1. So I'm going to subtract a -2. So I'm going to have subtracting -2. So if I'm doing my slope here, -1 minus 2 would be -3. 4 minus a -2, when I subtract a negative, I end up adding 4 plus 2 is 6. Now before I simplify that fraction, if I look at my graph to see what this actually meant, if I started here, the change in my y direction, I had to go down 1, 2, 3. That's the -3 on top. The change in my x direction, after I went down 1, 2, 3, I have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to the right. So I really, if I have the graph, can count and find my slope. I went down 3 and over 6. But they want you to practice using the formula so that when you don't have a graph or you have really big numbers, you've practiced up using the formula. Now, of course, we know that if I have -3, 6, I'm going to simplify it, because it's a fraction, to -1/2 for my final answer. So number 2 here, if I'm going to find the slope, the change in y over the change in x. So again, I'm going to look up the points here on the graph. This first point is at -3, +1. point on the right is at positive 2, positive 4. So 2, 4. So this would be my x1 and my y1. This would be my x2 and my y2. So my y value from point 2 would be what number? The y value from point 2 is going to be 4. So 4 minus 1 on top. And then on the bottom, 2 minus a negative 3. Exactly. So 4 minus 1 gives me 3. 2 minus a negative 3, 5. Because I have to change that to a plus. So then I check it and I say, okay, if I'm going from this point to this point, I went 1, 2, 3 up, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over. 3/5. Can't simplify that. That's exactly what I did. Now, if you switch those 2 points around, you're still going to end up with the same answer. You just end up with a negative over a negative, because if I would have started with this point over here, I would have went down 3 and back 5, and the negative over a negative still gives me a positive slope. I like to always go from left to right, but if you want to switch them around, you can. It works. You get the same answer. So number 3, if we want to find the slope of our line, the first point on the left here, what are my coordinates?
Negative 4 and 3.
Negative 4, 3. And the second one is at?
1, negative 4.
1, negative 4. So my slope, I'm going to do the change in y over the change in x. So y2 minus y1, I would do?
1 minus a negative 4.
1 minus a negative 4. So subtract, whoops.
Oh wait, no, that's on the bottom.
That's on the bottom. You better pay attention here. That should be on the bottom. That's my x's. I got to do my y's. So I should have,
Negative 4 minus a negative 3.
whoops, negative 4 minus
Or positive 3.
a 3. So subtracting my y values, I have a negative 4 minus the 3. And then for my x's, I'm going to have the 1 minus a negative 4. So the y minus the y, the x minus the x. So negative 4 minus 3 is
Negative 7.
-7. 1 minus a negative 4 is
Positive 5.
+5. So then I go back to my graph and I check. If I start here, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 down, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the right. We know that when they put it in on the computer, they'll put the negative out in front because they like it that way on the fractions. So negative 7/5 is your slope. Your line is going downhill from left to right. So they give you some with the graph so that you can practice using the formula, so that when you get to the next ones where you don't have the graph, you kind of have the idea how the formula works. So, oops, I'm trying to write the y already. My formula for slope. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we'll just say this is the x1 and the y1. This is the x2 and the y2. So if I do my change in y, I would do what?
Negative 7 minus 6.
Exactly, negative 7 minus 6. And then my x2 minus my x1 would be
4 minus negative 6.
4 minus that negative 6. So on the top we're going to get
Negative 13.
negative 13. On the bottom,
10.
10. So negative 13 tenths is going to be our answer. So number 5, we want to find the slope of the line passing through -2, -7, and 3, 5. So if I do my change in y, I'm going to do
5 minus minus negative 7.
5 minus a negative 7. And the x's?
3 minus negative 2.
3 minus negative 2. And so 5 minus a negative 7 would give me 12. 3 minus a negative 2 gives me 5. Can't simplify that one. 12 fifths. Or 12 fifths. I can't do anything to simplify that one. Number 6 then, if I'm going to find the slope, I'm going to do what?
Negative 6 minus 7.
Negative 6 minus 7 over
2 minus negative 3.
2 minus negative 3. And so I end up with
Negative 13 over 5.
negative 13 fifths. So they get to where we're going to graph a line if I know what the slope is. So they're going to give me a point that I'm going to start with. I'm going to plot this point first because that's going to be my starting point. So we want to find the graph of the line that has a slope of 3, passes through the point 2, negative 1. So I'm going to start and I'm going to plot the point 2, negative 1. I'm going to put that dot on my graph. From there, I want to understand what the slope of 3 means. If I have a slope of 3, I'm going to write it as a fraction because slope is the change in y over the change in x. So I'm going to write it as 3 over 1. The top number is the change in the y direction. So the top number tells me to go up or down. Since it's positive, I'm going to go up, right? The bottom number is the change in your x direction. Your x-axis goes left and right. Again, it's positive, so I'm going to go to the right. So I'm just going to start at this dot here, and I'm just going to count. 1, 2, 3 up, 1 to the right. There's my next dot. I really only need 2 dots to draw my line, but so I can draw straighter, I'm going to count again. 1, 2, 3 up, 1 to the right. I can then connect my dots and draw my line. My slope was a positive 3. It went uphill as I went from left to right. Up 3 and over 1.
So why is it on
What?
5?
Where did I start at? 2, negative 1. So I went up 1, 2, 3, and over 1, which put it over here at 3, 2, right?
Yeah.
Then I went up 1, 2, 3, and over 1.
Oh, okay.
So every time here I added 3 to my y value because it was going up 3, and then 1 to my x value.
Oh, okay.
So on number 8, I'm going to start by plotting the point negative 4, 3, because I want to graph the line with a slope of 3/4 that passes through the point negative 4, 3. So negative 4, 3 would be back here. Negative 4 up 3. My slope is going to be 3/4. Again, both of those are positive numbers on this one. So on the change in my y direction, I'm going to go up 3. The change in my x direction, 4 to the right. So if I start here, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 up, and 1, 2, 3, 4 to the right, and I end up right on the y-axis at 6. If I went up 1, 2, 3, and over 1, 2, 3, 4, then I'm way up on the top of my graph over there. Now keep in mind that you could do a positive slope by doing a negative 3 over a negative 4, right? A negative over a negative is still positive. So from this point, I also could have gone 1, 2, 3 down, and 1, 2, 3, 4 to the left. Notice that still should line up with all those other dots we did. So I can connect my dots and draw my line. And again, it's positive. You know it should go uphill as you go from left to right. The next one says we have a slope of -1. So again, we're going to start by plotting the point 3, -2. So over 3, down 2, there's my starting point. If my slope is -1, I can either write it as a -1 over a +1 or a +1 over a -1, right? Either of those are equal to -1. So if I do this one is telling me to go what direction? Down 1 and to the right 1, right? So if I went down 1 and to the right 1, here's my next dot. Down 1 and to the right 1, there's my next dot. If I went the other way around, this is telling me to go up and to the left because it's negative on the bottom. So I'd go up 1 and to the left 1. Up 1 and to the left 1. Notice my dots still line up all right in a row. You only really need 2 dots to draw your line, but I got lots of them there. So when your slope is negative, you can either put it as a negative over a positive or a positive over a negative, depending where your first starting point is. If it's way close to the edge, you might have to go in the opposite direction. (10, 11, and 12 are getting you to the point of understanding your equation, and they want you to find the y-intercept and the slope of your line. Well, we talked about way at the very beginning, if I have my line in this form, y equals mx plus b, I know the number in front of the x is the slope, I know the n number is the y-intercept. So what they're going to do is have you rearrange those equations and solve them for y so that you can then answer the questions. So if I have 6x plus 3y equals -3, and I want to get the y by itself, I'm going to move my x term to the other side first. I'm going to say that 3y equals, because I know I want my x first here, I'm going to put it in that order. So since this was a positive 6x, when I move it over, it's going to be a negative 6x. And then that -3 is just going to go on the end. So I'm just sneaking this over here, but I'm going to put it in front so it ends up in the same order of what my equation looks like. Then I still have to divide by the 3. So if I divide these by 3, y is going to equal -2x minus 1. Now I can look at my equation and answer my 2 questions. This one happens to ask for the y-intercept first. The y-intercept is just going to be that number on the end. If x is 0, I'm going to get -1 for my answer. My slope is going to be, oh, how'd that get typed in like that? That's supposed to say slope. We'll just fix them. Okay, y-intercept and slope, that's what we're supposed to be finding. The slope is the one that's in front of the x. The slope then is just going to be -2 for that line. Again, sometimes when you solve, you will get fractions. It's okay to have a slope that's a fraction. You saw that already. So number 11, if I want to find the y-intercept and the slope of the line, first thing we're going to do, rearrange it, solve it for y. So -5y is going to equal, don't forget the negative in front of that 5. When I move my x to the other side, it's going to be -4x plus 2 then. Then I'm going to go ahead and divide by my coefficient of -5. So I'm going to divide by -5. And y is going to equal, here I've got a negative over a negative, so it's going to be a positive 4/5 x. And then here a positive over a negative, so minus 2/5. So my y-intercept is going to be the negative 2/5 on the end, and my slope is going to be the 4/5 that's in front of the x, exactly. And unfortunately, I'm way down at the bottom of my page, so I can't move that up very far. I'm going to rewrite it over here. If I have 3x plus 5y plus 1 equals 0, I still want to go ahead and solve that for y. If I'm going to solve that for y, either I can move the y over or I can move the 3x and the 1 over. It doesn't really matter. Which ones do you want to move? Do you just want to move the y over, or do you want to move it the other way?
Just the line.
Just the y, okay. So if we just move the y, because that's shorter to do, 3x plus 1 is going to equal
-5.
-5y. So in order to solve that for y, we're going to divide by -5. So -3/5 x minus 1/5 equals y. Or y equals -3/5 x minus 1/5. I switch it around so it looks pretty. So my y-intercept would be don't forget the sign, -1/5. And my slope is going to be -3/5.